It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Irwin, hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Esperanza, our two special guests today, calling where they're from a store, a retail outlet, almost, while it is, doesn't really do it justice, because honestly, this is a Sag Harbor institution.
A landmark.
An icon.
And we're hearing giggles, but it's true.
But my gosh, it is certainly true. And okay, I think
they have done it. They have done that. Really, you have continued.
No question. Yes. I mean, a story. I mean, it takes in so many cool elements. You know, the history of Sag Harbor, a changing business environment. We're going to try to get into all of the above as much as we can. But let's introduce. And Esperanza, in all candor, I was working on the pronunciation of these names, so I'm praying I get it right. So please, let's welcome the proprietors of Canios of Sag Harbor, and that would be Maryann Calendrille and Kathryn Szoka. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Irwin and Esperanza. We're really delighted to be here with you this morning. Thanks for having us.
Oh,
thank you.
It's really our pleasure, and we're really excited. So, before we get into the Canio stories, I mean, look, I've lived here for 35 years. Esperanza's lived here longer than that. So, Kathryn, we know you have a background in photography. You're a photographer by profession. I know, Maryann, you've done some writing. What other things can you tell us about yourselves before we get into the story? Are you both from Eastern Long Island? Did you relocate here?
So I'll jump in. I grew up on Long Island in Nassau County, and so I'm a Long Island girl. I went east instead of going west.
Right.
I was a teacher. I had been teaching at Southampton College, and that was my profession before the bookstore became a possibility and then a reality. I had known of the bookshop. I had been a customer there for a long time. Knew Canio, took Italian classes with Canio.
Oh my gosh.
My mom and Canio's daughter worked together at Grumman Aerospace Corporation in Bethpage.
So the 6 degrees.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
long-standing connection.
Wow.
With that beloved place that was actually so much a part of my own continuing education in literature.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
And yeah, I've been in Sag Harbor Village since roughly 1985.
Okay.
So seen a number of changes.
Yeah, gotcha. And
For sure.
Kathryn?
So I grew up off island. I grew up down in Maryland, the great state of Maryland.
Okay.
So, but I've been in New York, really over half of my adult life, and I've been on the East End since the mid 80s and in the Sag Harbor area since the early 90s.
Okay.
So, just really fell in love with the place when I first arrived here. And as a photographer, one of the series that I have been working on over time is called The Vanishing Landscapes. So
Yes.
I photographed the bookstore's facade way back when as part of, the series. And it was one of the reasons for us taking over the bookstore was we really wanted to make sure, in 1999, when we took it over, that it did not become a vanishing landscapes and that we preserved it for the community.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's such a perfect way to actually think of it as part of the cultural landscape of this area.
We like to call it like the southern gateway to Sag Harbor.
Yeah.
It really is. People come, when they come up from the turnpike, they see the iconic sign and that says, you're in Sag Harbor now.
And getting into, and Esperanza, I have to say, I use the term the romantic story of Canio Pavone finding this. Now, I went to your website, Maryann and Kathryn, and you have you tell a little bit about the story. But before we get more into present day and when you've been involved, I mean, I think our audience would really love to know. So Canio really just read a novel, the Joe Pintoro novel about Sag Harbor, and literally without any other knowledge of the place, just said, I'm going to take a ride to Sag Harbor now. I mean, is it that romantic, or am I romanticizing it in my own head, Esperanza?
It really is that story. At that time, he was a language teacher in the Huntington area and had been called for jury duty. Book people often bring books with them when they know they're going to be waiting around a long time. So he had Joe Pintoro's novel. He was released early that particular day from jury duty.
In Riverhead.
Sorry?
He was in Riverhead.
In Riverhead, yeah. Had some time to kill for the afternoon. Was a nice day. Let me take a ride out and see what that place is all about.
Gosh.
And similarly to the Steinbeck story about coming to Sag Harbor, we can get to that later. But, he came down, as Kathryn describes, through that sort of southern gateway, saw the building vacant with a sign that said for rent. And Canio always had the dream of having a bookshop. He would, on weekends, take boxes of books into New York, downtown, and sell books on a street corner, and just loved that interaction. He saw that for rent sign, thought, that'd be a great place for my store. He was taking a trip that summer. He said, was going to Greece. He said, well, if the store is still for rent when I return from Europe, I'm going to do it.
Oh my
And it's meant to be, and it was.
Yeah.
Of course, I would also offer that 1979 or 1980 Sag Harbor, much different than today. So
for sure,
real estate was still for rent 2 months later. Not a surprise.
Yes. Right. I was going to point that out. Yeah.
Esperanza, Kathryn is giving us segues now, because that's exactly where we were going to go with that. Thank you for that, Kathryn. But it's so true. Like that's part of the story here for us anyway. Like this was 1980. Again, we're not talking 1920. This is within our lifetimes, obviously. Yet this was a vastly different, not only Sag Harbor, a vastly different Eastern Long Island, East End of Long Island, a completely different place. And that's such a great point. A store for rent. Okay, there was no, we don't have to sign the lease today. Well, we'll see if it's still around. Wow.
There wasn't a lot of competition at that time. It was a quiet village. It was a quiet village, except perhaps for the bar scenes in the evening where, friends of mine who really grew up here told me their parents warned them, you're not going downtown to Sag Harbor. It would be dangerous. So that space remained vacant.
But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was a strong literary presence in Sag Harbor at that time.
Absolutely.
Really going back to the 40s, a lot of writers, editors, people in publishing had already started kind of seeding the area to make it really ready to receive a literary bookstore like Canio's books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually did, we did an episode called The Sag Main Set, a podcast, and it was about, the sort of the cast of characters, writers that really were in Bridgehampton, Sagaponack at the time. Peter Matheson, Truman Capote. We put a couple of pictures on our website and Instagram of them. James, there was another one. James Jones standing in front of the old Bobby Vans when it was across the street. So
that's iconic.
Back when if you passed out in the middle of that street, of Montauk Highway, there wouldn't be any car to run you over.
And Canio's, vision of this bookstore, or how it evolved, I guess, this was not a Barnes and Noble. This was a very different kind of place. I mean, he was diversifying the experience, and I know we're going to get into your vision about it in a couple of minutes, but with the readings, the Moby Dick readings, the histories, this was not just this was not a place where to go and necessarily get the latest John Grisham book. Okay.
No,
I mean,
no,
am I
it
right,
sounds
Maryann
it.
and Kathryn?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's always been a welcoming place, number one, an intimate place, and a community gathering place. You know, the Chicago writer Nelson Algren was in Sag Harbor, sadly for just a very short time, but right at the beginning of Canio's time there, they became friends. It was a place for conversation. It was a place to meet other interesting people. And, you know, we have tried to continue and nurture that because that's what we love. We did have a dream, Kathryn and I, just a bit of a fantasy about wouldn't it be great one day to you know, have a kind of a cafe, music, you know, art filled space for people to enjoy. Um, and I'm getting ahead of it a little bit here, but you know, that did come to be. But you know, again, I mean, use the term, you know, retail outlet and store at the top of our conversation. Um, it's not that model. It's intimate, it's conversational, it's a place for exchange of ideas.
Yeah, no, I think, well, that has been its appeal through the years. And I completely relate to that. I think Kathryn, you maybe had, or both of you perhaps, you know, when I had a gallery, I had that same kind of vision of having it be more of a place, not of pure commerce, but really of a gathering space for people and an exchange for exchange. And boy, have we lost those spaces these days.
You know,
Well, I
and
mean,
it's,
I think that if I might just say that, you know, Canio, as a teacher, you know, that his idea was to, the store was only open on weekends for several years in its infancy because he was still teaching.
He was teaching,
right.
yeah.
Right. So it was open on Saturday and Sunday, and he would come in and people would come in and talk with him. And the rent was, you know, probably what you would pay on a dinner, you know, for one night going out now in Sag
Yes,
Harbor.
true.
So the idea was it gave him a place to meet with people and discuss literature, which was his love. And Maryann and I are both teachers as well. And so we are really very drawn to and very committed to the educational aspect of what the store offers.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at the realm of retail businesses, bookstores already are in a category all their own because they are really about ideas. They're about promoting, you know, what is the best in human nature, really, to learn. And I always say a novel is the cheapest vacation you'll ever take.
Mm-hmm.
And so within that realm of bookstores, Canio's and some others, of course, you know, kind of rise into a different category of being really more of a non-for-profit. Maybe we'll even talk about the non-for-profit that we started a little bit later, because that's more of our niche really than the retail.
Yeah, I promise we're going to get into that because that's really a fascinating part of you know, of this entire story. But, you know, Esperanza, it's really interesting. You know, Canio's model, the model that Canio started and Maryann and Kathryn really are following up on. They were almost ahead of the curve. You know, booksellers, again, I was not a bookseller. I don't claim to be, but it was really more about, it was selling a commodity. This was an idea of a community gathering space, and some of the larger chains have now started doing ideas that Canio and subsequently Maryann and Kathryn had been doing all this time, which is really an incredible part of the story. I mean,
Well, that shows you that that's what people need, and
that's right.
because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it.
1,000%.
I mean, you know, to compare to the chain model, that's a whole nother animal. But there were small shops in New York City. In fact, there's an article in the New Yorker this week by Louis Manan that's really interesting about sort of the history of bookshops and bookselling in the United States. But the smaller shops, for example, I mean, a shop that I loved and grew up in, the Gotham Book Mart, for example, which you know, I came to when in its location then in the Diamond District. How bizarre was that? but they were certainly having literary gatherings, and it was, you know, a hangout for, you know, quite well respected writers of the day. So the smaller shops would be kind of more along with our approach to things. And I think, yeah, the chains got the notion like, wait a minute, we're missing something.
Right.
But you know, it's a different animal.
For sure.
Yeah, and I just want to hop in because I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to a photographer's place that was in Soho, which was a bookstore that I went to frequently when I lived there. And of course, Three Lives, you know, a
Right.
great bookstore that's been there a long time. But what the chains are trying to do now, you know, what we kind of ignore them because, you know, what we have and what those stores had or have is a certain authenticity that you just really can't create whole cloth, you know, and so that is the magic and the mystery that, as Esperanza said, draws people to these places. You go visit a town, where do you go? You go to the bookstore.
Right.
You know, you want to find out the heartbeat of the community that you're in. So anyway, just wanted to shout those other stores out.
Yeah, no, we totally agree. Esperanza, you know, I almost wish I was a listener right now because I'm just fascinated by this. You know, like I almost, I wish didn't have to partake and I could just soak this in because it's such a really a feel good story in so many ways. So let's move into 1999. That's when the two of you purchased this store. Maryann already alluded to, the sort of the dream of owning a bookstore. I mean, I think everyone in a sense has that. It is sort of almost like a little bit of a fantasy, Esperanza, like that whole, and you mentioned it with your own galleries, trying to find that same kind of thing, like really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes to like, and sorry to interrupt you, Irwin, but I was thinking as you were talking before about this, the sort of what is now maybe a formula for some retail stores. It's like that lifestyle store. And to me, but what you have is a lifestyle space where people can create, so sort of recreate. That's the thing, the word I'm looking for.
And before we dive any deeper, we also should really tell our audience this is on Upper Main Street in Sag Harbor. So it's it's not in the center, like next to the movie theater kind of thing. It's a little bit more of a destination, but this building is just draws you in. I mean, it really, the whole environment inside. I went to visit Maryann there, when we were talking about doing this, and it's just what a beautiful, just the environment inside that Maryann and Kathryn really have created. So, but getting back to this, the owning the bookstore, the kind of a dream and everything else. Now, while you've continued with a lot of the things that Canio started, you've also put your own stamp onto this. And we'd like to hear about, not only the cultural cafe, the resurrecting the Moby Dick readings, but the other things you've been bringing to the community, because it's really what they've been doing, Esperanza. This is really for the community.
Yeah,
without question.
certainly.
Well, when people, oh, go ahead, Maryann.
Yeah, well, no, I was just talk about expanding and creating Moby Dick as a 3-day.
Sure. Well, listen, one of the most gratifying compliments that I hear when I'm in the store is people walk in and they just immediately look around and they say, a real bookstore.
Yes.
This is going back to what we were just talking about, but I just can't underscore that strongly enough. And what we do at the store is to pursue our passions and to offer those to the community, and to also get the feedback from our customers. Like, what do they want to read? What are they passionate about? And then reflect that back. So, I mean, the inventory that we have, because the space is small, is highly selected. And so every book, is brought in there because either we feel strongly that we want to read it, we want to offer it to people, or we know our customers and we know what they might want. So I just want to put that as a broad sort of a context. And then to get a little bit more specific, both of us are very much interested in books about nature, And so we really expanded that section, that offering when we took over. We have a very good local interest section as well. A lot of that is about nature, but not just nature, about the East End. And so that's another area that we've highly expanded. Our religion and spirituality section as well has been expanded. And then art, a couple of things that we've done. I'm sorry, I don't want to give you a laundry list, so I'll stop after these two things. The one is we did bring back the gallery so that we have art shows. And in expanding the Moby Dick Marathon, I'll just step back and say Canio started that in '83. He did it around the clock, 28 to 30 hours in the middle of the night. You can imagine not necessarily so many people were coming at 3 a.m. to listen to that. And so we actually
dedicated crew, however.
That's very performative.
And some people in pajamas.
Yeah. So in the early 2000s, early aughts, we actually partnered with the library and did the marathon for a couple of years. And that we did over 2 days from like 9 to 9, a little more civilized. When the store turned 35 in 2015, we heard everybody saying, bring back the Moby Dick Marathon, and we decided to do it in honor of that anniversary. But we decided to do it in a way that would allow a lot more people to have access to what we think is really one of the greatest American works of art. And so it takes place over 3 days. It takes place at least a half a dozen locations. So we partner with the library, we partner with the Whaling Museum, the Old Whalers Church, Eastville Community Historical Society, and other locations. And that allows a lot of people to go to those institutions, to listen for that time. And we have over 150 people read.
Wow.
And anybody can read. You
Right.
sign up in advance for just a 10-minute section. And so we've had 14-year-olds, we've had 84-year-olds,
Wow.
maybe even 94. So it's just a way to respond to two requests. Bring back the marathon, and then we hear people saying, what is with Moby Dick? I could never finish it. I didn't care for it. It's a man's book. And so we get that,
Right.
and we wanted people to be able to maybe have an opening to that work, and hearing it read out loud, the language, it really sparks a lot of people's interest who say, you know what, I'm going to go back, I'm going to read the book. So
Wow.
that makes us feel great.
It's Esperanza,
sorry.
it's remarkable how it always comes back to community. I have to keep saying
It does.
that.
I was
Really.
thinking that, and I mean, it feels good just listening to you talking about it, frankly.
I hope you both sign up for next year.
I've always thought about it. I will admit to being one of those people that's like, what's the big deal with Moby Dick?
Great, you're our perfect audience.
She is, and she may come,
And I'm a reader.
and she may come in her pajamas. So
You're welcome. You're welcome.
People do dress up, so that would be appropriate for certain sections of the book, I guess.
For sure. But Kathryn,
I was going to ask,
Esperanza.
do you know of any other place that does this, does something like this with Moby Dick, specifically with Moby Dick? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, there's a whole book about. There's a whole book written about.
Is there a manual?
Well, it is a phenomenon. Yes, there are other institutions. Mystic Seaport in Connecticut.
Okay.
The New Bedford Whaling Museum up in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
But nowhere in like Arizona. I mean, it's clearly it's related to.
Not yet.
It's related to the culture.
Yeah, University of Chicago does it.
Provincetown, Rhode Island. I'm sorry, Provincetown on Cape Cod. They have one.
Okay.
I mean, we feel the Canios is the first institution to do a marathon reading of Moby Dick. We definitely are before Mystic Seaport and New Bedford. So, and they are really the most prominent whaling locations, I guess. Sag Harbor would be third, but we were first with Moby Dick.
All right, but regardless of the competition, the phenomenon of gathering together, hearing the book read aloud. Okay, this is storytelling. This is an ancient practice, and something that nourishes not only the listeners but the reader. you know, it's something that human beings have been doing since, you know,
We could talk.
you know,
Yeah.
gathering
Yes.
around the fire in the evening,
Yes.
I
sharing
love
stories.
it. I love it. It's wow.
Something happens, really something happens there.
I,
You step into the role, if you're a reader, you step into the role for a moment as if you were Melville,
yeah.
constructing that story. And listening to the rhythms of the sentences, etc., for the audience members, it is transforming. You're just pulled along. So
And yeah, and also not to mention you're extending the legacy, of the stores, the origins of Canios by
sure,
resurrecting this and bringing it
sure.
back. I mean, there are just Esperanza, there are just so many beautiful elements to this,
Plus, the book mentions Sag Harbor several times.
Several
Wow.
times.
You know, when that happens, our cheer goes up, and you know, we claim hometown pride on that one.
I'm
So
There's a
sure.
Sag Harbor Sailor in the book, which is wonderful.
yeah,
And but we do other marathons. We just finished a Travels with Charlie marathon a
Uh,
couple of months ago. And hearing that book read out loud was remarkable because you realize how well crafted each vignette that John Steinbeck wrote about meeting with people across the country when he took that trip with his dog, Charlie, in the early 1960s. And so, yes, I just, I underscore what Maryann just said, hearing work read out loud, there is some alchemy that happens in that moment. And I was impressed all over again with Steinbeck's craft of creating Travels with Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know we'll touch on the Steinbeck house for a moment.
yeah.
We do want to get this into present day though, and some of the current challenges you're facing. But Kathryn, Maryann, can you give our audience a little background on, which I think is really such a beautiful part of the story, is the Canio's Cultural Cafe, which is as you brought out earlier, Kathryn, a 501c3. Esperanza, not many for-profit businesses establish a 501.
nonprofit arm. Yeah.
Really, that's really such a, terrific. So tell us about that. Your vision for bringing in the Canio's Cultural Cafe.
Yeah, sure. I think we created it in 2009, and again, getting back to the fact they were educators, we wanted to create an educational nonprofit that would underwrite all of the programming that we did at the store. As we've already discussed, the bookstore itself is really, more about community, more about creativity, more about educating the people about different aspects of the literary arts and arts in general. So we felt that in order to maintain a brick and mortar presence in a village that at that point was starting to change quite a bit from the 80s when you could lie down in the middle of the street and not worry about getting run over,
Right.
this just made sense. We did a few trips to visit other bookstores around the Northeast, and we found that there were some that were all non-for-profit. I'm not sure if we found any hybrids at that time, but we just thought, this kind of makes sense. And so we decided to do that, and it's been extremely helpful, and it's allowed us to increase our programming over the years.
Well said, Mike.
Very smart.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Esperanza, I really wish I was a listener to this. I'm almost getting distracted by having to
I'm
participate
sorry. Yeah.
because I'm so fascinated by this entire, what the two of you have really created here. But we do need to take it into present day, and
Sure.
it's not a secret. It's, you've not just the challenges any business faces, and this is. At the end of the day, you are a brick and mortar retail establishment, and retail establishments, when one doesn't own the property, has a lease. And tell us where Canio's is. I mean, I hate to. Here we go, Esperanza.
reality.
We're
somber part of
bringing the
our
somber
Hamptons
part
podcast.
on. Yes.
It's on.
It's all right. This is
talk
the
about-
reality. This is the
There is a
reality.
reality here. Now, you're not going to be in your present space long term. Am I correct, Maryann and Kathryn?
That is definitely correct. Yeah. The landlord has ended our lease September 30th. For well over a year, we've been looking for prospective locations. And, you know, as everyone knows, Sag Harbor Village and surroundings have changed dramatically in the past 5, 10 years. You know, the COVID situation, you know, has had a role in that as folks have come out and purchased properties, et cetera. So it's been very challenging, very difficult. We have looked at a number of places. There are all kinds of complications. We were hopeful. These prospective places didn't pan out. We continue to be in discussion about a prospective location. That remains to be settled. And, you know, in the meantime, I mean, this is really one of the functions of the cultural cafe. I mean, we are going to have to take some sort of hiatus with the retail aspect, but the cultural cafe can allow us to continue to hold events at partner locations.
Right.
We will be organizing that 2025 Moby Dick Marathon, no matter where we are. It's a movable feast. And that really was one of the functions of creating that. If we lost the brick and mortar space, Canios goes on the road. It becomes Travels with Canios. And one day we're at the Episcopal Church. One day we'll be at the Unitarians or Old Whalers or other, you know, community locations who have opened their doors and said, oh, please, we've already held some larger events at other locations. And it's a wonderful partnership for all of us.
Yes.
So it's, you know, I'll say honestly, it's a very challenging and stressful time right now. We've had, you know, 25 amazing years. There have been ups and downs along that time frame as well. And people are just pouring in now to kind of soak up the vibe, you know, hear the creaky wooden boards, look around at the overstocked shelves, and just share their appreciation, you know. So yeah.
Wow.
Gee, I envision Canios on wheels, you know, like.
Well, you know what? E.L. Doctorow told us once, he said, get one of those old horse-drawn carts and go down to Long Wharf.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm
thinking downtown.
I wasn't thinking horse-drawn, right?
Well, Kathryn has a big truck. Yeah.
But Esperanza,
Yeah, we
you
want
know,
to get a truck and pack it with books.
I'm very encouraged. I mean, I'm look, our heart bleeds. This is not the first, obviously, that any of us have heard of, you know, of a business facing this particular challenge. You know, it's very common. My father-in-law was an accountant, a sole practitioner, and I remember, I can't tell you how many times he would relay stories, and he had a lot of small businesses, his clients, how he used to tell his clients all the time, if you ever have the opportunity to buy your business, the asking price means nothing because you're buying yourself a job, a career. And,
Right.
and, you know, and many of his clients, and they were first generation, some of them in this country really listened to him. But it really is, Esperanza, encouraging to hear that between the 501c3, the Canios Cultural Cafe, there can be a life here, and we do need to start wrapping up, but there can be a Canios life in some way, shape, or form. And it sounds like there will be.
We're working toward that. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just step in and say, first of all, the community has been incredibly supportive. I mean, we have been, we're, you know, buoyed up by all the people that have come in and said that we want you to stay in Sag Harbor. As much as it's hard to hear that like 1,000 times a day, it is also heartening. And a number of the places that we've looked at, they want us, but there's issues related to zoning, there's issues related to renovations. So, you know, I want to leave the audience with the optimism that there will be, you know, we're in active conversations right now with one spot. There will be a place for Canios in the near future. And of course, the Cultural Cafe continues seamlessly in terms of the programming that we offer. We've worked through 9/11, we worked through the Great Recession, we worked through the pandemic. And so, this is another transformation, but we're committed to making it and having Canios be a vibrant part of the Sag Harbor environment.
Your persistence is truly admirable, because many others would have given up and said, well, retiring back to, we're going down south or something. It's really, and I think it's your connection, your very deep connection with the community. But I can imagine that, as you've said, it buoys you.
If I could make one last comment, I know we're about to sign off, but the Steinbeck House acquisition, I cannot say how significant that is for not only the village and the town, but really the state and nationally. And the fact that we have this sort of jewel representing Sag Harbor's literary community is so very important. And, without being, I'm not being humble now, but without being too overstating it, without Canio's books, I'm not sure that would have ever happened, because
I will say it for you. It wouldn't have happened.
I second it.
Again, your persistence, both of you. I mean, it's clearly you have a mission, and you will set out and you won't give up. And that's really hats off to you.
Yeah. Very
Community.
gratifying.
Community. There's Esperanza, I'm sort of rendered speechless here. I apologize, but it's just such the story is just, it's such a heartwarming story, what this place has been, what it has meant to that Sag Harbor community and the East End in general. And, you just feel it.
Yeah.
We don't know, but I don't know Maryann and Kathryn well, obviously, but it just, but to both of you, it comes off and we feel it. And, I've lived on the East End for 35 years. I want to thank the two of you just for what you've given this community in the past 25 years.
What? Listen,
we appreciate that. It's been our great privilege. It's been an amazing experience. We love what we do. It's been our great privilege to be able to do this. And if folks haven't had an opportunity to visit the Steinbeck House, do go there by appointment for a wonderfully guided tour at steinbeckhouseny.org. It's really very special. We're so grateful for your interest. Thank you both,
Thank
Irwin
you.
and Esperanza, for our time this morning.
Maryann and Kathryn, thank you so much for really participating. Any final thought, Esperanza?
No, really, and get over to Canio's where it is now before.
Yes.
If you have not been, and then it's so forward to what you will do in coming year and beyond.
Yeah.
And
thank you. Thank you both. If I could also maybe just offer for those who might want, friends of Canio's have started a GoFundMe to help as we are moving. So if they want to just go to our website and find that link, we'd appreciate that. And come by and say hello. We're still there till the end of September.
Yes. Yes.
Maryann and Kathryn, again, thank you so much for joining us in Our Hamptons. Esperanza, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Irwin. Thank you both.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.